Thank you. Good morning. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak here. I'm actually here for LeWeb, and I spoke there yesterday, and I'm going to speak here today. And the rest of the time I'm going to play in Paris. So I haven't come to Paris too many times in my life. I truly do love your city. And I happen to be, usually when I come to Paris, I'm with my wife, which is a rare occasion that I travel with my wife. And actually last time I was here with my wife and daughter, which cost me 2 times as much as just traveling with my wife. That's a whole other story. So I'll give you a little bit of my background. I used to work for Apple. I was Apple's software evangelist. So my job was to convince people to write Macintosh software. That was the first time I worked for Apple. The second time I worked for Apple, I was Apple's chief evangelist. This was way back in 1997, 1996. I hope you guys were born then. Barely. And after that, I started a software company. After I left Apple the first time, I started a software company with some French people. It was called ACI. It had a Macintosh relational database called Fourth Dimension. And so that started my familiarity with France and Paris and French people and French programmers. After I returned to Apple the second time as chief evangelist, I left that to start a Garage.com, which is a boutique investment bank and venture capital firm. And now I'm primarily a writer and a speaker, and I also advise Motorola. So for Motorola, I work with the CEO. We just introduced a new phone in Europe called the Moto G, which is a sub-$200 phone. The design goal for the Moto G is to be almost as good as an iPhone 5 at 1/3 the price. It's $200 off contract, so it's a very different price point in much of the world. And that's my background. I've written 12 books, some of which you see at the back table in French. My French publisher is here. And I will be happy to talk about those books. My latest book is a book called Ape, which is author, publisher, entrepreneur. It explains how to self-publish a book. And today's topic I chose as the top 10 mistakes of entrepreneurs. I will go over what I see as the top 10 mistakes of entrepreneurs and how to prevent them. And so I hope that if nothing else, you will not repeat the same mistakes that other entrepreneurs make. So please make different mistakes, at least. And this speech I've given a handful of times, not that many times, and mostly to schools, in particular the Haas School of UC Berkeley. And I truly enjoy this speech. So, okay? Can I begin? Yeah? Ready to go? Okay. So first of all, I always use a top 10 format. This is because I've seen so many tech speakers in my career, and most of them suck as speakers, and they not only suck, they go long. And that's a bad combination. Tip number 1 for you. If you suck as a speaker, try to go short. So tech speakers in general, they suck and go long. And it's not so bad if you suck and you go short. It's not so bad if you're great and you go long. But if you suck and go long, that's a really stupid combination. That is like being stupid and arrogant at the same time. So what I do is I use a top 10 format so that in case anybody thinks I suck, they know approximately how much longer I'll suck because I have exactly 10 points in this presentation. Okay? So point number 1 is I meet with entrepreneurs all the time, and they create a financial forecast. And what they do is they multiply a really big number by a small number, and they get a big number. To use a classic example from Silicon Valley, let's do the analysis of this with Pets.com. Okay, so this is a 10 or 15 years ago company. So Pets.com, here was the thinking. There are 300 million Americans. 1 in 4 owns a dog. That's 75 million dogs. Each dog eats 2 cans of dog food per day. That's 150 million cans of dog food per day. How hard could it be for our company with our rock star programmers to get a mere 1% of 150 million cans of dog food per day eaten in the United States? 1% of 150 million is 1.5 million. Let's say we make $1 per can. So conservatively speaking, we should be able to make, $1.5 million a day. Let's be even more conservative. Let's cut that in half. Let's say we make $750,000 a day. So you take $750,000 and you multiply by 365, because dogs eat 365 days a year. It's not like B2B. This is, this is cow to canine. I mean, it's C2C business, right? So you take $750,000 and you multiply by 365 and you get a $300 million business. Worst case, conservatively speaking, first year. So we hear this kind of forecast every day. Every day. No one ever comes in and says we have a crappy market that doesn't have a lot of upside. Everybody has a great market. And what I see done is the reasoning that I just went through. That reasoning has some bad ramifications. One ramification is typically you inflate the expectation of your investors and your employees, because you're saying, how hard could it be? Conservatively speaking, we'll do $750,000 a day times 365, $250, $300 million business. That's the worst case first year revenue. Okay? The likelihood of you getting $300 million in your first year is zero. Zero. No company's ever done that. So that's number one. And number two, the offshoot of this reasoning is, well, conservatively speaking, we're going to do $300 million a year. That means we need a lot of infrastructure. We're going to need at least our site to be mirrored in 2 or 3 places, because God knows if anybody comes to our site and wants to buy dog food and our dog food site is down, it'll ruin our reputation. So we need to have our site, mirrored in a couple places. We need IT staff. And if people have problems ordering dog food online, they need to have great support. So now we need to hire a customer service infrastructure so that we can answer questions in real time about buying dog food. And so what happens is you do this conservative estimate of $300 million. You figure, well, I'm going to need at least 2 or 3 locations, and I'm going to need at least 30 or 40 people to handle the hundreds of calls we're going to get in every day. And so you do this, and next thing you know, you have a monthly infrastructure costs, overhead costs of about $200,000-$300,000. So now you're spending $200,000 or $300,000 a month because you're anticipating a $300 million business of selling dog food. Of course, your rockstar programmers are at least a year late, because every programmer is always a year late, right? So now you have all these customer service people, you have these IT people, you have this entire infrastructure, you have this entire overhead, and you're not selling anything because your site is not ready. Okay? So this goes on, your programmers are late, you go to your board of directors, you tell them they're late, they're not surprised because every investment they've made is late. So they kind of look the other way, they kind of laugh the first time. And then you convince them that, wow, we hired these really great customer service people. We hired these really great IT people. And we know our programmers will be on time the next time. So it would be foolish to take these world-class customer service people and these world-class IT people and get rid of them now, because in 60 days we're going to have to hire all new people and retrain them again. So we need to sustain that investment. Well, guess what? So you keep those people, you don't lay them off, you don't lower your overhead, and then the programmers are late again. And this is what happens all the time. The leading cause of failure in Silicon Valley startups is running out of money. The leading cause of failure is death, which sounds somewhat like a circular reasoning, but if you think about it, that's really true. The leading reason for failure in tech companies is death, which is running out of money. So this is the mistake, to multiply a big number by a small number to get a still big number. The way you fix that is you calculate from the bottom up, which means that instead of you doing 300 million Americans, 75 million dogs, 2 cans of dog food per day, total addressable market of 150 million cans of dog food per day, you do it from the bottom up. You say, okay, so how many unique people could possibly come to our website in a month of our new website, easydogfood.com. And you, in your wildest hallucinations, you'd say, okay, so maybe 100,000 people will come to our website. So you take 100,000, then you say, like, of that 100,000 people, what percentage might actually buy dog food from us? So let's be conservative. Let's say it's 1%. So 1% of 100,000 people is 1,000 people. So 1,000 people actually buy dog food. The 1,000 people, let's be, again, cautiously optimistic. Let's say those 1,000 people buy a case of dog food a month, right? 30 cans, 30 days. So 30 cans, 30 days. So that's 1,000 people buying one case, which is 30 cans. So it's 1,000 times 30. So that's 30,000 cans of dog food a month. 30,000 cans of dog food a month done from the bottom up is a lot less than 1.5 million cans a day times one. Well, that is 1%. So if you took 1.5 million cans of dog food per day, multiplied it by 30, compared to 30,000 cans of dog food a month, and the reality is that you're going to be much closer to selling 30,000 cans of dog food in the month than 45 million. Trust me when I tell you this. So I think the best way you can fix this problem is always do your financial projections from the bottom up, not from the top down. Don't take a big number, total addressable market, and keep multiplying it down until you still have a big number. Start from the very bottom. How many, if you're doing a retail operation, how many stores could you possibly open up? How many restaurants could you open up? How many people could come to a website? How many, if you're doing a car service, how many cars could you possibly deploy on the road? Forget that, the total addressable market for taxis in Paris is 2 billion euros a year. If you only got 1% of 2 billion euros, you know how big our taxi cab company would be. How many Mercedes can you lease in a month? How many drivers can you deploy in a month? Do a bottom-up analysis. That's mistake number one that I see all the time. Mistake number two is to scale too fast. This is the offshoot of mistake number one. So we're going to have 1.5 million cans of dog food per day. We need several sites. We need 30, 50 customer service people. And companies, entrepreneurs like to hire in advance because they're so confident in their rock star programmers. They're so confident it's going to happen. And they have a lot of overhead for nothing. The solution to this is what we say in America is to eat what you kill, which is when you get the sale, then you worry about scaling to service it. Don't be so optimistic as to think we're going to do $300 million this year. We need to scale for that in advance. Let me tell you something, if you have $300 million in sales, you will figure out a way to scale. You can do it in real time, you can do it even late, but never do it early. I have never seen a company say we're going to do $300 million, we're going to staff up for $300 million business and actually achieve $300 million business. Okay? So eat what you kill. Mistake number three is to focus on forming partnerships. I don't know the sort of linguistics here in France, but in America, lots of entrepreneurs throw the word partnership around, and what it translates to in most cases is lack of business model. So if you can't figure out a business model to make money for mutual benefit of multiple companies, you say we form a partnership. In other words, it's total bullshit. Okay? Don't focus on partnerships. Partnerships are bullshit. I learned this working with Apple because Apple would form all these partnerships with companies. And the perspective of Apple was, well, we have a weakness and you have a weakness, so maybe we can form a partnership and both hide each other's weaknesses. If you ever start thinking like that, you know you're doomed. Okay? A great partnership works when two companies have great strengths. And you're not trying to cover weaknesses, you're trying to enlarge, expand, accelerate strengths. So there's a very big difference between covering weaknesses versus expanding strengths. The solution to this is to always focus on sales. My recommendation for entrepreneurs is very simple. Sales fixes everything. Seriously, sales fixes everything. Every problem you have will be fixed by sales. It's easier to recruit when you have sales. It's easier to get investment when you have sales. It's easier to get up in the morning when you have sales. Everything is fixed by sales. Now, some of you are going to say, well, what about profit? You know, can we get a little more sophisticated in reasoning? Yeah, the answer to that is probably yes. But at the end of the day, man, as long as you're selling, you have cash coming in, you're in the game. And as long as you have cash coming in, you're not going to die. And as long as you're not dying, you still have a chance. When you have to deal with your investors, and you will be dealing with your investors, you know, they're on 10 different boards, and of the 10, 9 of them are below their forecasts. They're below their conservative forecasts. Okay, so you want to be the one exception that is equal or greater than the conservative forecast. If I leave you with no other message, sales fixes everything. Next problem. Next problem is to focus on the pitch. I meet so many entrepreneurs, and they're obsessed with the quality of their pitch. They want to make it this 60-slide, just, you know, work of art. And nothing could be worse than that. You know, the purpose of creating a pitch is that it's a means to an end. And the end is financing. But I'll give you a better means to an end. The better way to get financing is to, A, never need financing because you're bootstrapping your company. The way you bootstrap your company is you focus on the prototype. I mean, you actually ship quickly. I think today the startup atmosphere is so different from 10 or 15 years ago. 10 or 15 years ago, you had to raise a couple $1 million. You had to buy tools. You had to buy physical space or rent physical space. You had to buy servers. You had to build co-location. You had to do all these kind of things. Okay, fast forward till today. You know, open source, every tool is free or cheap. Marketing is free or cheap. You use Twitter, Facebook, Google+, whatever it is. Use social media for your marketing. Do you have to have office space anymore? Not as much. I mean, you come into facilities like this, you share office space. You don't need to get your own office. Do you need to buy servers? Not at all, right? Everything is Rackspace or Amazon S3 or, you know, whatever French equivalent there is of that. Nobody buys a server anymore. You send $1,000 a month to Jeff Bezos and you get a terabyte in the sky. All right, so it's very, very different. So if you go down the list of all the things you need money for, do you need real estate money? No. Do you need tools money? No. Do you need marketing money? No. It takes a lot less money to start a company. So now, if it takes a lot less money to start a company, guess what? You don't need to focus on the pitch. You don't need to suck up the venture capitalists. You should think of venture capitalists as drug dealers. Okay? So drug dealers give you a temporary high. They want you to get addicted. But eventually, it's going to kill you. I'm telling you now, venture capital is like crack. You need to postpone taking crack as long as possible. Hopefully never take crack. Is there venture capitalists in this audience? No, not beside me. I'm reformed. So seriously, you should really try to avoid venture capital. Focus on the prototype. Get it out. Number 5. Number 5 is in this presentation that you're working on, if I haven't dissuaded you enough, you put too many slides. In Silicon Valley, we call this an elevator pitch. And is there an elevator in this building? I know we walked up 4 floors. There isn't an elevator, right? Okay, so the test for this is if you're walking up that stairway with someone and you're trying to explain your company, you should be able to explain it in 2 floors. Okay, so not that you're in the Transamerica Tower and it's like 105 floors or the Sears Tower. It should be 2 floors here if you're walking, right? So it's 30 seconds. In a pitch, my rule for a pitch is the 10-20-30 rule. So the 10-20-30 rule is that the optimal number of slides in a presentation is 10. You should be able to give those 10 slides in 20 minutes. You may have a 1-hour meeting, but many people still use Windows laptops, and those people need 40 minutes to make it work with the projector. Okay? If everybody used the Macintosh, you'd all have 60 minutes. So how many of you don't use a Macintosh in this room? See, so these are the people. You're going to need 40 minutes to make it work with the projector. Okay, so that's why. If everybody used the Macintosh, this rule would be the 10-60-30 rule. Okay, but lots of people still use Windows laptops and they can't make it work with the projector. So I had to dumb this rule down. Okay, so the 30 is the font size. The optimal size font for presentation is 30 points. The bigger the font, the better. Steve Jobs used like 150-point font. Okay. The problem with using a small font is the temptation to put too much text. When you put too much text, it's not readable to the audience, but you will read it to the audience. And I think what happens is when you start reading your presentation to the audience, you lose the audience, because the audience very shortly figures out this clown is reading the slides to me. And so I can read silently to myself faster than this clown can read them to me. I'll just read ahead. What do I need to listen to him for? And you lose your audience. A good rule of thumb for this is figure out who the oldest person is in your audience. Divide his or her age by 2. So if you're speaking to 60-year-old people, 30-point font. 50-year-old people, 25-point font. Someday you may be pitching a 16-year-old VC, okay? That day, 8-point font. But until that day, 10 slides, 20 minutes, 30 points. Number 6. Number 6 is this mistake of trying to make serial progress, which is to say, I as an entrepreneur, I want to do things in a serial manner. First, I want to raise money quickly. Then I will get the money and I will hire people. And then we will focus on making the product. And then we will focus on selling the product. And then we'll focus on collecting the money. And then we'll focus on revising the product. And then we'll focus on selling more product. And then we'll focus on collecting more money. So entrepreneurs, like authors, would like to do things in a serial way. An author would like to write the book, edit the book, publish the book, sell the book. Okay? And I can tell you, as an author and as an entrepreneur, life is simply not serial. Life is parallel. And so as an entrepreneur, you're going to have to raise money, recruit, make your prototype, sell your prototype, fix your prototype, collect money at the same time. You're going to be moving 5 or 6 challenges down the road at the same time. Life is not fair. It's not going to work where you think, I'm going to focus on raising money. That's all I'm going to do. I'm going to do that in 30 days so I can get to the real business of my business, which is writing software. It's not going to work like that. Raising money, at least in Silicon Valley, is a 6 to 12-month process. And if you did nothing for the 6 months but raise money and then start writing your software, you are starting a year or half a year late. Okay? So you have to come to the realization that as an entrepreneur, you have to move all these things down the road at once. As an author, I need to write my book. I need to be editing what I've just written. I need to be building my social media platform. I need to be thinking about the design of the book. I need to be thinking about the marketing of the book and the distribution of the book all at the same time. Life is not fair. Life is parallel. It's not serial. Number 7. I just noticed this wire thing. That is so cool. Huh? Who made that? That is so cool. God, French people. French people. I've never seen that something that cool. That's so cool. Can I take that with me? Maybe. Or just leave it there. And I'll always come back. Put that in the Louvre. Number 7 is the mistake of trying to retain control. And in a sense, this comes back to the quantitative nature of tech startups, which means that it's usually founded by engineers. And engineers are good in math. So engineering and math says that if you own more than 50% of a company, you control the company. So the key to the control of a company is retaining 50% or more. Mathematically, that is true. But emotionally and realistically, that is not true. The moment you take money from outside investors, you are working for outside investors. It doesn't matter if you still control 50% or more of the company. You are not in control. Yeah, I have never gone to a board meeting where any issue was decided by a vote. I've never seen a vote, let's hire this person. 51-49, founders carried the day. Let's go into this market. 51-49, founders win. You never vote like that. Everything is always unanimous. You're all right or you're all wrong. It's never 51.49. And so the concept that I have to fight to retain control. So this means, if I get pre-money valuation of $3 million versus pre-money valuation of $2 million, my share is going to be 10% versus 7% or something like that, right? And at the end of the day, I'll tell you, my experience is you're either going to make so much money that you never dreamed you could make so much money, or you're going to lose everything. There's nothing in between. So does it matter if you own 8% of Google or 7% of Google or 6% of Google? Well, yes, mathematically, those could be hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars, those percentage points. But you know what? When Larry and Sergey started Google, they had no concept that it would be worth $500 billion, right? And so if you fought for that 1%, well, let me put it to you this way. If the outcome of your company, well, let me say this, back up even more. If you are going to be happy or not based on whether you own 10% of a company or 8% of the company, probably the company has failed. If it comes down to 2 percentage points really makes the difference between you happy or not, it probably was a failure. The company is either going to be worth $200 million, so you made $20 million, or you made $16 million. But the difference between $16 million and $20 million in terms of your happiness, your lifestyle, is negligible. Most likely, you're going to be worth $0 million, honestly. Okay, so don't sweat trying to retain control. Instead, rather than trying to own 10% of a pie instead of 8% of a pie, what you should try to do is make a bigger pie. It is not the percentage you own of the pie, it is the size of the pie, right? It is much better to own 1% of Google than 20% of Webvan, all right? So pick your battles, pick your battles. Your battle should be about making the pie bigger, about making the per share price higher, not owning more shares. Number 8. Number 8 is many entrepreneurs, they believe that patents are the key to defensibility. Again, I have to confess ignorance. I don't know how it works in France in terms of patenting or the European Union. But in America, many naive entrepreneurs say, well, the reason why we're defensible is we filed a patent. Nothing could be further from the truth. In America, it takes about 10 years to get a patent, 10 years and $10,000. The probability of your company still being around in 10 years is low. And even if you are around, the probability that you have the time and money to litigate a patent as your defensibility strategy is pretty low. What makes a company defensible is that it succeeded. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't file a patent because someday if you are acquired, it may be valuable. It is also, I think, a very good thing for your parents. Because then your parents get to say, my son or my daughter has a patent. That's, that's worth 10 grand. But if you think that you're going to patent something and therefore Microsoft can't step all over you, or Google can't step all over you, or Yahoo, or Cisco, or Apple, or you're deluding yourself. Well, at least in America. I don't know. Maybe here it's better. But whenever you read these stories that Microsoft got sued for stepping on a patent and they had to pay a company $60 million. The reason why you read about that is because that hardly ever happens. It's news. Suffice it to say that in your PowerPoint pitch, if you say that here's our possible ways for liquidity. 1 is acquisition, 2 is IPO, 3rd is we're going to sue a large brand who has infringed on our patent and win. Trust me, you will not get funded. Okay, that is just not the plan. So what you do, the way you succeed in defensibility is you succeed. You succeed. File the patent. God bless you. Spend a day with your lawyer. Spend 10 grand, whatever. God bless you. Do that. But really, focus on success. Focus on making your company scale. That's the way you succeed. Number 9. Number 9 is to hire in your own image, which means engineers hire engineers, white people hire white people, nerds hire nerds, geek hire geeks, like that. And really, what you need in a company is pretty simple. I mean, you need one person to make the product, and you need one person to sell the product. The third person should be adult supervision to collect the money. So an ideal startup has roughly 3 people: somebody to make it, somebody to sell it, somebody to keep the kids and the inmates in prison. All right? So that's basically 3 things: 1 adult, 1 engineer, 1 salesperson. That's it. That's it. And even that may be excessive, because you could do it with 2 people, which is why you hear about Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Wozniak makes it, Steve sells it. Selling, making. That's all there is to it. So when you do this, like if Steve Wozniak hired a marketing and salesperson who was just like him, an engineer, we would not be talking about Apple today. Trust me when I tell you. Flip side is, if Steve Jobs hired someone just as full of shit as him to develop the engineering, Apple would have never shipped. He needed a Woz, and Woz needed a Jobs. And so don't hire in your own image. You should hire people who complement you, right? So if you're really good in finance, get somebody good in engineering. If you're good in engineering, get somebody good in sales. But hire people who complement you, not duplicate you. This is a very, very challenging thing, because in particular, engineers love to hire engineers, because engineers think that engineering is the purest form of knowledge, right? And so so if you're an engineer, you think, oh God, sales is easy, finance is easy, operations is easy, everything else is easy. What we do is engineering. That's the hard stuff. So let's hire really bright engineers, and then we can always turn them into marketing people. That dog don't hunt, okay? Just hire people who complement your skills. Number 10 is to think that you should befriend your investors. I have to tell you that I meet with many, many entrepreneurs after they've gotten their first round. And the story goes like this. We just closed our round, and we really like our investors. Those investors said that they're investing in us. They invest in people. They don't invest in markets. They don't invest in technologies. They believe in us. They're going to stand by us. And I've heard stories that most VCs are assholes, but not these. We see eye to eye. They understand me. They're going to be loyal to me. We're going to play golf together. We're going to ride in their Mercedes. We're going to go in their yachts together. They really like us, okay? You're trying to befriend your investor. That is a big mistake. Like I said, this is a crack dealer you're trying to befriend, okay? They want you to take drugs. They want you to be addicted. They want to cash out with you. So what you need to do is to maintain an arm's length transaction, and the best way to do this is to exceed expectations, going back to sales, fixes, everything. So what you like to do is have, in a sense, benign neglect. You want your investors to leave you alone. You want your investors that when you need their help, you contact them and they help you, but you don't want them looking down your throat all the time. And the way you do this is you exceed expectation. Now, there's 2 ways to exceed expectations. Number 1, I don't know if there's, this probably does not translate, but the concept in America is called sandbagging. I don't know where the concept came from, but sandbagging means if you think you're going to do 10 million in a year, tell people you're going to do 8. Okay? Put a number out there that you are 90% sure you're going to hit. So if you think you're going to do 10, say 8. Because it is much better to do 8 having said 8 than to do 8 having said 10. Because if you said 10 and you do 8, you are a freaking failure. You came in 20% under what you said you would. If you said 8 and you do 8, you're a hero, because nobody ever comes through. If you said 8 and you do 9, you are a freaking hero too. You're like, wow, this is the only company in our portfolio that forecasted 8 and came in at 9. Holy cow. If you forecasted 10 and came in at 9, same 9 million, same 9 million. But you forecasted 10, you came in at 9, you are a loser, right? You did not meet your forecast. So the key is sandbag your forecasts. Now, there's a limit to sandbagging your forecast. You can't exactly say 1 million, because at 1 million, you might not be interested enough to get an investment. So whatever your, take this reasonable number and back off, I would say 20%. Just put it in a place where you are really 90% certain you're going to hit the number. So exceed expectations. You should under-promise and over-deliver. And this is the 10th mistake. And I give this speech so seldom, I forget what the next slide is. It could actually be the last slide. Sometimes I have an 11th slide. I can't remember in this presentation. And it is the last slide. So there you go, the top 10 mistakes of entrepreneurs. So thank you very much. So now, it's 9:45. My flight leaves Friday morning at 10 o'clock. So I have from now till Friday morning at 10 o'clock to answer questions for you. Although we're going to the Louvre tonight, right? Is tonight the Louvre night? And tomorrow, where are we going? Did you hear that? That's where I'm going. Like, because in America, there's this TV show called Andrew Zimmern, and he goes, and it's called Bizarre Foods. So he goes all over the world to bizarre foods, like all over the world. And one was about Paris. And he went to this market that opens up at 4 a.m. or something. And said, tomorrow morning, I'm going to go do that. And I'm going to see how French chefs. I was thinking about this. It's kind of off topic. So let's say you're a chef in France, all right? So people here, they dine really late, right? You eat dinner at 10 p.m., right? So 10 p.m., you're done at dinner at 1 a.m. But this market opens up at 4 a.m. So if you're a chef, does this mean that you cook all night? You finally get off work at 1 a.m., and then you have to go buy stuff at 4 a.m.? So you sleep 3 hours? Is that what it's like to be a chef in France? Yeah? That's why you should stay in school and be a programmer. Yeah. Wow. So when do you sleep if you're a chef? Huh. Okay. Well, that's my big adventure for tomorrow. I can't wait to do that. So questions? Le mic.
First one is an artist.
Hello, Guy.
Hi.
Well, thank you to be there. I think everyone here has read or is about to read the article start, so thank you for being in Paris. I have a question. You talked earlier at the beginning of the presentation. You talked about prototyping. I have a startup right now which is working. We've been around for more than a year, so we get it works. And at the beginning of our startup, I think we made a mistake, but I would like to have your take on this. We tried to build a community of very users, and it was very hard to focus on everyone, to build the product. So what would you recommend to people starting from idea to prototype? How would you recommend to handle this first stage of trying to get your first user?
I don't think there's any right answer to this, because a lot of it is just luck, and it's just the law of big numbers. You have to try a lot of things. So, my recommendation is that you remain flexible. So here's the this is why entrepreneurship is so hard, right? So on the one hand, I can tell you, remain flexible, pivot. When you see different needs, change your business model. On the other hand, for every time a company pivots and succeeds, I can also tell you a time where a company stayed true to its vision despite early negative signs and succeeded. So depending on which business book you read, you'll have totally different recommendation. I wish I could tell you the answer. One answer I would give you is not that it's infallible, but one of the best ways to decide on this is to build the product that you would like to use. Now, you might say, well, that's kind of dangerous, because if we build the product that I want to use, what if nobody else is like me? So I'm building it for a market of one. That is a danger of that. But, when I look at most major tech successes, that's kind of what happened. Like Wozniak was not building a computer based on a forecast from IDG or IDC or Accenture or McKinsey for personal computers. Wozniak was building a personal computer that Wozniak wanted to use. Thank God there were more people than Wozniak who wanted to use that computer, right? And so I think that's the richest vein. It's not infallible, but that's a rich vein. So one interesting question is, what if you start a company and you find yourself building a product that you can't stand. That's tough. That's tough because it takes so much passion and so much reality distortion and so much denial of negativity and naysaying that it's so much harder if you don't believe in what you're doing. So my recommendation is you build the product that you want to use yourself, and you just hope that there are other people like you. That's the best advice I could give you. By the way, if you are reading or going to read Art of the Start, I'm going to revise that book. That book is 10 years old. And so, for example, there's nothing in that book about crowdfunding. There's nothing in that book about social media. So I'm going to fix that book. I'm going to fix that book this year. And I think I'm going to do it in a... There's books like Letters to a Young Mathematician, Letters to a Young Scientist. I'm going to do it like Emails to a Young Entrepreneur. So entrepreneur asks me, what's a good presentation? And I'll answer as if in an email personally. So I'm going to change the format. I actually, using social media, I have a website where I ask people what you would like me to cover in the revision of Art of the Start. And I sent this out to my social media channels, and I now have 600 questions in that database. So I hope a lot of them are duplicates because it's a lot of questions to answer. But the Art of the Start is going to be revised. Yes?
You just talked about crowdfunding.
Yes.
Do you have any take on this?
Yes.
The pros, the cons?
Yes. I love the concept of crowdfunding. I love the concept of crowdfunding because I think it is much more accurate to gauge consumer interests via crowdfunding than via venture capital investment. That in a sense, a venture capital investment is taken as a proxy for the possibility of the success of your company. But venture capital investment is a poor proxy because venture capitalists are wrong, 9 times out of 10. So I think it's much more, it's much better data. If you can pre-sell an iPhone case, or I don't know, I'm using whatever. I advise a company that makes a little gizmo that you plug into your electric outlet that uses low power Bluetooth. So with your Bluetooth phone, you can control the outlet. Also, because it's low power, you pair it to your phone. So when you enter the room, you can program it so when you enter in the room, it knows you have your phone, so turn on the light. That kind of thing. So that's perfect for a Kickstarter kind of program, right? So, if you were trying to convince a venture capitalist to invest in that company, it would take you 9 months. You'd have to prove why it's better than something that Belkin is doing, or it's better than something that somebody in Taiwan could knock off. But if you put it on Kickstarter, and you get 1,000 people to buy it at $50 each, that's $50,000. It's much easier to raise $50,000 that way, and it's real proof. I mean, you've really convinced people to buy it, as opposed to a rich venture capitalist who's driving around in his Mercedes playing golf 3 days a week that they should invest in it. I think it's much better data. So I love the crowdfunding concept. And I gave you this list of all the reasons why it takes a lot less money to start a company. So now, if you could raise $50,000 or $100,000, you can start a company, right? And you'll be doing it without dilution because you're not selling equity. What you're doing is you are pre-selling your product. So it has the added benefit of real data that people are willing to buy your product. It's non-dilutive. And you don't get pain in the ass shareholders. Man, like, what's wrong with this equation? It's faster, it's easier, it's better, Now, I mean, it's not a complete solution, but, and I'm not saying everybody's going to be a Pebble and raise $10 million. Okay, that's not true either. But $100,000 goes a long way for most tech startups these days. So I really love the concept of crowdfunding. Wait, who's got the mic? Yeah.
Hi guys, such an honor to have you with us today. This morning in Paris, you made such an insightful presentation. We really loved it.
I am Empire, so we basically help refugees become entrepreneurs to transform refugee camps from being dependent entities into being independent, creating an economy. One thing I was perhaps expecting that you share something with us was the issue of vesting. How do you share your company with your co-founders? Okay, you must not retain most of your company when you talk about investors, but how do you share this piece of in the beginning with your co-founders?
Okay, so conceptually, there's several principles in play, right? So one is you shouldn't spend a whole lot of time negotiating with your co-founders because, again, you're either going to own 8 or 10% of something huge or it's going to be worthless. So don't aggravate yourself about what percentage you own. Aggravate yourself about creating a great prototype. That's principle number one. Principle number two is, although at the moment you start your company, you all swear that this is the greatest thing, you love it, you're going to dedicate your life to it, you can't see working any other place for the rest of your life, it's just not going to be true, right? So in a sense, you kind of need a prenuptial. And the way a prenuptial works in this is you all have to say that we are going to vest our stock. And even though you are the founders and you know you're going to stay with this company for the rest of your life, you still vest. And vesting means it takes 4 years to get all the stock. There's a 1-year cliff, so you don't stay at least a year. You lose the stock. Put all that in place for everybody. And the reason why you do this is because 6 months from now, when the other founder decides that this is not his life or her life call, then you say, okay, well, hallelujah, you quit. You haven't reached the 1-year cliff. You don't have any stock. Aloha oi. Have a happy rest of your life, right? Now, if you had 6 months earlier said, okay, we really believe in you. Here's your 10% now, forever. Here's your 10% now, forever. Here's your 10% now, forever. 6 months from then, the person quits and still keeps the 10%. What are you going to do? Two bad things. So one is you have 10% less of the company to share with others. So you've used some of your currency that you could use now to recruit the replacement, for example, right? And the other thing is that a sophisticated investor, when they look at your capital structure, will say, well, what happened to Joe? Joe was a co-founder. Joe was with you for 6 months. Joe quit, and I see Joe still has 10% of the company. And you're going to say, well, when we started the company, we thought we would all be here forever. We all contributed together, so we all got 10% right out the gate, no vesting. And your investor will maybe not say it to you, but think, this person is stupid. This person didn't listen to some adult's advice to vest. This person is clueless. Do I want to invest in a stupid person who would give 10% of the company to a founder, assuming the founder would be there forever? This does not help you get an investment when your investor thinks you're stupid. So it has all these kinds of ramifications. Generally speaking, CEO, founding CEO, 10 to 15%. Founding VPs, 8 to 10%. It's something like that. It could be higher, it could be lower. It's something like that. It's not 90% CEO. It's not 0.9% either. It's 15%. It's something like that. And that's kind of roughly the parameters you should be working at. One more piece of advice is don't have title inflation. Right, so you have to name a CEO, in America anyway, you have to name a CEO for legal structure. But do you have to, just because the person you were drunk with that weekend that you started the company, that doesn't make him or her CTO, okay? Because someday you may have to hire a real adult to be CTO, or you may have to hire a real adult to be VP of engineering. So don't throw those titles around so loosely. Just because you got drunk with that person on the weekend and you're CEO, that doesn't mean, well, you got to make him happy too. He should be CTO or CMO or CFO or CIO or C whatever. You should throw these titles around very, very carefully. Because if you are 2 guys in a garage, 2 gals in a garage, and you're CEO for the legal work, and so now you say, God, I'm CEO, and we were drunk together that weekend when we thought of this idea to sell dog food online. So since he's the programmer and I'm the sales guy and I'm the CEO, I'm going to make him the CTO, right? And then God forbid you're actually successful, and now you say, huh, you know, my drunken buddy from that night where we decided to start this pets.com, he ain't that great a programmer. He's never written a program in his life. He's never really finished a website in his life. You know, he was in Intro to PHP when I met him, and we got drunk, right? So now, but I've already named this loser CTO. So now, what do I tell the adult who really understands PHP program? What do I call him? You know, chief technical officer, super chief technical officer. You know, what? I'm at the top of title inflation already. So take it easy with the titles also, not just the equity.